Thank you for coming to our gender identity and sexual orientation. This is something that you're welcome to watch the YouTube video on or just flip through the slides, but we're hoping it'll help give you some background information that will make the October 29th presentation run a little more smoothly. So I'm Debbie Sechrist. I'm a math professor here and the advisor to Lambda Alliance. I use they, them pronouns, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We also have Melody McHaley, a student here and the president of the Lambda Alliance. And we've worked with Jess Fowler on this presentation. She wasn't able to be here today, but she gave us a lot of great ideas. Again, thanks for coming. And let's start with sex and gender and what the difference is. A lot of people use these interchangeably, but actually they're very different. Sex is biological and physical characteristics. So that's, the body. And you can be female, intersex, or male. Intersex means that you have some physical characteristics of each, or your physical characteristics don't match just one of those sexes. The probability of someone being intersex is actually about 2%, which is about the same as the number of the percentage of redheaded people. So if you know a redhead, you probably also know someone who's intersex. They just may not talk about it. Gender is the social, the psychological, who you are. And that you can be two-spirit, boy, gender fluid. Gender fluid means that you kind of feel like one gender in one sense and another gender another time. Gender queer just means that you don't fit in with the typical notions of gender, whatever that might mean. Non-binary is similar to gender queer, means that you don't fit into the binary of man and woman. You're something else. And I say, I'm just me. And woman. Two-spirit, I forgot to mention at the beginning, that is a term used by some Native Americans who use it to describe someone who kind of fulfills a third gender role in their society.
So we're going to go over the vocabulary of the LGBTQ acronym. There's a lot of parts to it. Kind of like the full acronym that we know of right now is LGBTQIAP, and I'll go over what all of those mean. So L stands for lesbian, and that's a woman who is primarily attracted to another woman. G stands for gay, which is experiencing attraction primarily to members of the same gender. So it's kind of a common misconception that gay is only for men, but that's not usually the case. B stands for bisexual, and that's a person who experiences attraction to people of two different genders. And then there's transgender, and that's an umbrella term for anyone who's assigned whose sex assigned at birth and gender identity do not correspond to societal norms. And then there's queer, which is an umbrella term to describe individuals who don't identify as straight and or cisgender. So it's kind of the umbrella term that we use to cover the LGBTQ community as a whole. And then there's cisgender, which is someone whose sex assigned at birth and gender identity correspond to societal norms.
And I'll add in here, queer is what's called a reclaimed word. It used to be used as a slur, and many of you may have been taught that that's not an appropriate word to say. But many people these days identify as queer and say, no, this is part of my identity. This is part of who I am. And you trying to make it into a slur doesn't make it a bad thing to be.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
It is acceptable to use queer for people who use queer for themselves. That doesn't mean that every person in the LGBTQ+ community will want that term applied to them. But if they do, that's the right word to describe them.
Next, we have the next Q, which is questioning. And this is an individual who is unsure about or exploring their sexual orientation or gender identity. And it's important to take into consideration that a lot of people are questioning their identity, who are questioning their identity may change their mind about how they identify. So not necessarily like the first thing that they like identify as is going to be what they stick with for the rest of their lives. Like some people change. So that's an important one. Then there's I, which is intersex, and that's a person whose physical characteristics are not typical of either male or females. And like Debbie was saying, this is not as uncommon as a lot of people think. And people who are intersex might not even know themselves that they are intersex. And then we have asexual, which is experiencing little or no sexual attraction to others, and or a lack of interest in sexual relationships and behavior. And this exists on a continuum. And then there's pansexual, which is a person who experiences attraction for members of all gender identities and representations. Or the plus sign, which reminds us that even with all these terms, we still have not represented every identity. However, those identities are valued and included. So some more vocabulary that we have. There's mix or MX, and this is a gender neutral honorific as opposed to Mr., Mrs., Miss, or Miss. So a lot of people who are like non-binary are more comfortable with using this because it's not gender exclusive. Cisgender man, and that's a man who was assigned male at birth. And a cisgender woman is a woman who is assigned female at birth. There's transgender man, which is a man who was assigned female or intersex at birth, but then later transitioned into a man. And then there's a transgender woman, which is a woman who was assigned male or intersex at birth and then transitioned into a woman.
And sometimes we abbreviate those and just say a cis man or a trans woman.
And then we have heteronormativity, which is a view that promotes heterosexuality as the normal or preferred sexual orientation. And then over here we have an example of heteronormativity. And these are two women who are marrying each other. But as you can see on that comment below, they're saying like, oh my God, such goals, like getting married on the same day as your best friend. So this person who's commenting is making the assumption that they're best friends and not wives. And then we have cisnormativity, which is a view that promotes the idea that everyone is assumed cisgender, and that because cisgender people are the normal majority, trans people are abnormal. So if someone comes out to you, the first thing that you should do is thank them for sharing. You don't have to make like a big deal out of it, but just know that this is a very personal, difficult thing for many people to talk about. And so appreciate that they're sharing this information about themselves with you. Check to see how confidential it is. If someone comes out to you, you can't assume that they're out to everybody else. So make sure that if someone comes out to you, that you don't repeat that information to anybody else unless you know that they are comfortable with you doing so. Ask questions, but keep them appropriate. If you wouldn't ask someone like if you wouldn't ask something like it of a heterosexual cisgender person, you probably shouldn't ask it. Educate yourself rather than asking them to educate you, unless they offer. And remember that they're the same person you've always known.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about pronouns. I referenced them a bit at the beginning of the presentation. People use he, him, she, her, they, them, ze, here. There are other pronouns. Some people even use no pronouns. And the pronouns are very helpful because they allow us to avoid things like Debbie gave Debbie's presentation and I thought that Debbie was a very engaging speaker because Debbie kept, you keep using the name over and over and over again. So pronouns are really helpful. Some people use more than one set of pronouns. So some people might say, oh, he, him, or they, them. Either one's okay. Please note that although they pronouns are singular, refer to just one person, the verbs are conjugated the same as the plural they. So you don't say they is non-binary, you say they are non-binary. Just like even for one person, you don't say you is non-binary, you say you are non-binary. This wasn't always accepted, but now it's in the APA style guide, it's in Merriam-Webster, it's in lots of great sources. So you can even see the dictionary definition of they. This is the 4th definition in Merriam-Webster, and it says used to refer to a single person whose gender identity is non-binary. And that also includes genderqueer, and really whoever wants to use they, them. There are some people who identify, I know of one person who identifies as a man but still uses they, them pronouns because they feel that they feel that their gender is not the most important thing about them, and so they prefer to use neutral pronouns. So lots of possibilities here. For pronouns, I tend to explain what pronouns are when I'm welcoming a group of people, whether that's a group of people in my class or in some other venue. And I explained that we usually guess pronouns. We usually look at someone and say, I'm guessing she, her, but we're not always right. And guessing incorrectly can be really, really harmful. So I give my pronouns, they, them, and I ask people what pronouns to use for them. Those pronouns don't have to be what they will always use or what they eventually want to use. This is just, what do you want me to use right now? I've added my pronouns to my email signature as well, so that's a little more clear, and I have a link on why that's important. I use mypronouns.org, and they have links for she, her, he, him, they, them, maybe a few others. A few more good practices. I try to use gender neutral language. I don't need to say, oh, you see that man in the red shirt? I can just say, you see that person in the red shirt, because I don't know if they're a man. Respect people's gender and sexuality. And be aware of homophobic, transphobic, etc. thoughts, words, and actions, even if you're a member of the LGBTQ+ community. Just because I have one identity doesn't mean that I'm not going to have thoughts about another identity that are discriminatory or unkind. So, being LGBTQ+ doesn't give us a free pass to say whatever we want, that's for sure. Speak up if you hear damaging jokes. That's kind of similar to those thoughts, words, and actions. If you hear someone saying something, first of all, if it's in a group, you may not know that, that identity that they're making fun of directly affects someone else in the group. Even if it's just the two of you, though, they might be telling those jokes to other people, and just having a good conversation about it can make a big difference. I've had some really good conversations with people, and really felt like we learned a lot from it. Remember that people change over time. Originally, my sister asked if I wanted to be called her sister or her sibling when I was first coming out as non-binary, and I wasn't really sure. But eventually I decided, yes, sibling is a better fit for me. Sister does not work anymore. So just because someone says, yes, you can call me your sister one time, that doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case. And finally, avoid cis or heteronormative statements, such as the girls will chase after him, or you'll have to beat the boys off with a stick. I've heard both of those applied to my kids. And I don't know their sexual orientations at this point. They are 6 and 7. So, the girls will chase after him. Well, I don't know.
So if you guys have any questions or comments and you want to follow up with us, we're all available over email. So again, Dr. Fowler is someone who has worked with us on this presentation and is willing to take questions. And then my email is the second one, and the Debbie is our club advisor and is a great resource as well. And so if any of you guys want any have any suggestions for us or comments or questions, please don't hesitate to email us. And we would like to thank these people who have helped us with this presentation. Thank you so much for participating and listening to us and educating yourself. And here are some resources for anybody who might need some follow-up help. We've got our campus counselors, Jerry and Heidi. Their emails and phone numbers are right there. And then we have our community support center here in town, which is a really great resource. And we've got, of course, Nicole Hazelbaker, who's the Dean of Students. And then Lambda, the LGBTQ+ Alliance. And Debbie is, again, our club advisor. We've got PFLAG, which is the community LGBTQ resource here in town. And then, of course, Residence Life, we've got Mike Piazzolla, and the Trevor Project, which is the crisis line for LGBTQ people.
So thanks, everyone. I will include the link to just the PowerPoint so that you can run through that on your own if you like, or look at some of the links. And thanks for watching. I hope to see you Thursday, October 29th at 3:30.